Okay, please stand, remove your cover, and join me in the pledge. After the pledge, we'll have a moment of silence again for the people suffering from the effects of the devastating fires in our Northern California and all the firefighters that are attacking the blaze. So, ready? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
That was a second?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you, Director Day and Director Anzini. Any board comments? Hearing none. Any public comment on the agenda?
If members of the public would like to address the board during any public comment period, please refer to the detailed instruction on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of the agenda. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
How do you vote? Division 1,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 5,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to communications and general managers. Do you have any employee recognition for us today, Jim?
Yes, I have one today. We received an email from Ann McGovern, one of our customers, in appreciation of Ashley Farrell, Gary Ryder, and Bill Cassidy. Ms. McGovern stated they should all be commended for their courtesy, their efficiency, and patience. Outstanding work. So congratulations, fellow employees. Keep up the good work. That concludes my recognition.
Thank you. And again, it's so nice. Every time we have a meeting, it seems like we have a member, one of our customers, commenting on the positive aspects of our employees, and they represent us and do a great job. Okay, and public comment for items that are not on the agenda.
It does not appear that any members of the public are wishing to speak at this time.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to communications. General Manager Abercrombie, do you have any report on our activities?
None today.
Thank you. Clerk of the Board, Jennifer, do you have any?
None today, thank you.
Thank you. This is too easy. I shouldn't have said that, probably. Yeah. Okay. Are there any comments or reports from members of the board? Yes, Director Day.
Yeah, I've had several inquiries about people, of course, concerned about the drought. And this particular inquiry, again, from several people wondering, what are we going to do about all the new houses being built and the water they consume? And so I, in our next drought update, kind of have a request. I am not proposing anything, but I would like to know, like in stages 3 and 4, legally, what could we do or not do? For instance, I think in stage 3, I think we say you are not allowed to fill or refill a new or existing pool. We're not banning the issue of pool permits. That would come from the county, but we're saying you can't fill the pool. And we have other restrictions in stage 3 and especially stage 4. What would be the legality of saying you can't hook up a new meter or something like that? That is unfortunately, because so much growth is happening in Folsom, and particularly in El Dorado Hills, people see it and are impacted by it. So that question is getting raised more and more. So if next time we could get an answer.
And what was the specific question again?
What would be the legality, could we, and again, I'm not suggesting that we would, but could we address that question, that concern of not letting new meters be hooked up, i.e. put a moratorium on building?
You bet. I'm President Dwyer. More than happy to address that when we do our next update on the drought and emergency responses to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wasn't there a period of time that EID did have a moratorium and was not?
Yeah, in the late 90s. Yeah.
Okay, maybe.
It was challenged in court. Now, I don't know how it all ended up. We could research it.
When we've been speaking to our Rotary clubs and other folks about the drought, that question comes up frequently. I inform the folks in those meetings that the new developments on the other side of the county line are primarily served by the city of Folsom, except for that small little area, and they were very much appreciated for that clarification. We did do an article in the waterfront that helped try and share that with our customers, but I think bringing that back to the board clearly on what the legality is would be appropriate. And I think as we message to our customers, even if we did that today, the impacts wouldn't be felt for several years, just because it takes time to, go through the building construction process.
Good, thank you. Director Osborne.
I echo Director Day's comments because I've been having people call me about people wasting water, and they say, well, as long as they keep building houses down there, I'm not going to worry about it. Well, I kept trying to send the message that land use planning is not our issue, and it's up to the counties, and of course they also look at the Folsom development and all that going on down there. So I echo your concern. Last Wednesday, I did my annual little program for Leadership El Dorado. I think it went off all right. They keep asking me to come back, so I guess it must be all good. So anyway, that went off pretty well, and there was about 15 people there, I believe, and they were given the tour of the slide park and the water treatment plant, and I think it went. I had some comments from people that, boy, that's an extensive operation there. So I think it went off all right.
That's good. I think it's always good. It's, so much happens behind the scenes that people don't see when they turn the tap on and the water comes out. But yeah, there's a huge infrastructure, as we well know, as we try to patch it together and continue to provide that service. So thanks. Director Anzini.
Yeah, just to kind of chime in here, I want to make sure, one, I want to compliment John for his presentation on the Zoom to the Cameron Park Community Services District. I chimed in and I watched it unfold, and it was informative, and the directors there had good questions similar to what we're discussing here. The other thing I think we need to also be cognizant of is, and I sound like a broken record, is transparency, transparency, transparency. And as so long as we keep communicating to people, even more so now than ever until we're out of this drought, and I know it sounds like a dripping faucet, excuse the pun, But it was on purpose.
Bad
Anyway,
analogy.
you know, to make sure that everybody is answered correctly in a business-like manner. I think it works fine, that people need to understand that the plans are there. We don't have the leverage when it comes, we do have now a member of the EID board who's on LAFCO, and I'm pretty sure that he's going to keep track of these issues for us. And that's why we have a representative there, so.
And President Dwyer, before the public speaks, also, you can direct them to our urban water management plan that we just presented to the board a month ago that shows that we have great water supplies. This is, again, an anomaly in the drought, and it's part of our water portfolio where in those few years that we do have droughts that we need to conserve. Otherwise, we do have adequate water supplies.
Before we move to the public, Director Camp has had his hand raised there.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, two things. LAFCO. I did get sworn into LAFCO here about a week ago, and we have two major issues going on right now. One is we're without an executive director, so we're starting that process for recruitment. Jose, as you know, left, I think, at July 1st-ish. Second is we're trying to finish up the MSRs. There's a consultant that's been hired, but there are numerous holes in some of the consultants' fact gathering. So we've slowing down that process and working to have a good report rather than a flawed report. So those are the two things going on with LAFCO. And then to echo in on Director Osborne, Director Day's comments, the El Dorado County Association of Realtors reached out to me and I gave a presentation to them. Thanks to staff for the excellent talking points. But obviously the big question in the room was, how is the drought going to affect building? And so carefully discussed, we're in good shape, but we're sure concerned about what the state may or may not do. And it's sort of crazy, it's inconsistent, but the state's pushing more housing, and you all know that. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to serve all that housing across the state of California with additional water. But anyway, that'll be I'm sure, the discussion of the year. Hopefully Mother Nature will help us answer this drought question.
Thank you, Director Camp. Okay, public comment, Michael.
Yeah, I just, you mentioned a moratorium, and I just wanted to refer to the late Mark Nielsen. When he was on this board, he was the one that pushed for a moratorium because at that time EID did not really know, it didn't have a good handle on its water, and now you have an integrated water system, totally different, and it's the urban water management plan. It's everything is under control. It was totally out of control. Then nobody knew what was going on about a whole bunch of things. And that's why there was a moratorium at that time.
Thank you for the,
President Dwyer, I believe that was pre-acquisition of Project 184, and so we didn't know exactly who owned what, and I think that's correct. One other thing I forgot on the next door computer thing, there's been a lot of discussion about this water situation and why 7 years ago when we passed a bond issue to build new dams, we haven't put a piece of dirt on a shovel yet. And so that every time we go through this drought issue, the dam reservoir retention question pops up again. So it's floating around.
yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move.
Camp will move it.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
And I'll second it.
Thank you, Director Anzini. Any board comment on the consent calendar? Okay, any public comment on the consent calendar?
It does not appear there is any public comment on the approval of today's consent calendar. Would you like me to call the vote?
Yes, please.
How do you vote, Division 1,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4, Division 5,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Moving on to information item 10, customer satisfaction survey. Jenny. I understand completely.
Well, good morning. Can you hear me? Is it on? Okay. Good morning, members of the board. I'm Jenny Downey, Customer Service Manager here at the district. Today, I'm going to go over our 2021 Customer Satisfaction Survey results. Next slide, please. First, we'll just go over some background information on the survey itself. We conduct surveys every 2 years. They are electronically sent to 40,000 randomly selected customers. The same questions were asked as in our prior years. Once again, we did have a 19% response rate, and overall, the results were static with just a slight increase in the overall experience and over-the-phone response. Next slide, please. So now we'll go over each of the results of the questions individually. So in the first question, based on your experience, how satisfied are you with the water service provided? We had a 91% say they were satisfied or very satisfied. This is a 1% increase from our 2019, so it's good to see that go up. Next slide, please. You're good. Question 2 was if you have telephoned into the district, are the phone calls answered promptly and professionally? We had a 97% very satisfied, or had no reason to call in. That again was a 1% increase from our 2019, so that's very good to see as well. Next slide. So in compared to other utilities field responses, is the district's response level excellent, very good, average, or poor? We stayed the same at 96% as compared to the last time we did the survey, saying that 96% was either excellent, very good, or average, or had no reason to call in at all.
Jenny, the next time we do this in a couple years, we might want to put some more specificity into the utility companies because those are kind of dated. You know, we might want to also use internet, you know, those kind of companies that sometimes there's a lot of dissatisfaction with them, and it might help our ratings a little bit that says, you know, hey, we're a lot better than Comcast. Not to throw rocks at any particular.
Jenny, my only comment would be I wouldn't include in the if you go back to the slide before. Yeah, so response 96%, and I know we're better than some of those, but some of those ones were compared to, but I wouldn't include average because again, to the point of, you know, whether it's Comcast or PG&E or whatever, average is not, compared to them, is not good because if we're, so I would not include average. I'd be just curious to see what the response is. No reason to call, which hopefully is the case most often, and excellent and very good. So that would just be my suggestion on that.
I'll take a look at that and see how that pans out there. But yeah, thank you. So our fourth question was compared to other utilities. We'll expand on that again next time. The district's water rates are very reasonable, or unreasonable. And we stayed the same at 61%, say they're very reasonable or reasonable. Same question, but for our sewer rates, it stayed the same at 51%, is reasonable or very reasonable. So when we asked our customers to rank what was most important to them for us to be looking at. Number one was water quality, with water reliability coming in second. Security of our water supply and quality, with the cost of water being right around in that middle area. The lesser were definitely the emergency response, our watershed protection, wastewater treatment, and additional water supply came in last, which seems, contradictory, but Next slide. So when we asked our customers what was their preferred method to receive information from the district, this stayed basically the same as well. Email is their number one choice, with our bi-monthly newsletter, The Waterfront, coming in second, and our district's website. And the lower ones were social media, newspapers, and our local cable stations. Next slide. So this is just a graph showing the last 3 years of surveys to see we've kind of stayed the same overall. We've had a slight increase in the overall and the over phone experience, and basically stayed consistent for our field response, our water rates. We've seen a slight increase on the wastewater rates since 2017.
Question for you.
Yes, Lori.
How many, well, I don't know if your survey does identify that on how people access information on our website and how many get an answer there.
That is not a question that is
Yeah.
asked of this.
So it seems to me that that could help also a little bit, because I do know for a fact that many people, I point them to a website, it gets their questions answered. And obviously, we might have that, a lot of people don't know we have a website. Others are clueless to that, which is fine because they're more settled. But the other part of it is we have a much more diligent population out there that rely on the internet. So perhaps we can incorporate some of this. Is the internet your primary source of information? And, it's just an idea for the social part of it, because the social part of it is a very big thing in our life now.
Yep, and we can take a look
Okay.
at that and maybe possibly do a separate survey on that to really see how our website is utilized
okay.
as well. That way it can be very focused, but we'll take a look at that.
What if, and this is just random thoughts, but what if in the question about, let's say, water rates, do you think they're reasonable, unreasonable? And have a little link that says you can click here and it'll show the study that says how do we compare with everybody else. Maybe use it as kind of an educational tool for people that want more information before they answer the question.
From a statistician or surveyor taker, I would say that's trying to bias the answer,
Yes,
so
you're
I wouldn't do it.
No.
Okay.
Along the same vein, I was going to wait till questions and that, but based on the response, the second response was people get it from the waterfront. And the problem with our sewer rates, maybe we should, in the next few months, dive into some of the regulatory stuff that goes in and convince people we're not doing this to make money at it. We're meeting the state regulations for wastewater discharge, and so something to, maybe we can educate a little more people about why those rates are so high, what they are.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll talk to Jesse about that. All right, so next slide. So just to end it, I wanted to provide some email and online statistics. Currently, 89% of all our customers have provided an email address or have opted out from it. It's a really high number for us. It's a great way to communicate with our customers. 65% of our customers are registered for online bill pay, with 26% signed up for reoccurring and 44 going paperless. And that concludes my presentation. Is there any additional questions?
Yeah. Excuse me. The question on opted out.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Means
Because,
they don't want emails from us.
okay, so 89% of the customers provided email addresses are opted out. How many opted out?
I would have to look at that. Well, the thing is some accounts have more than one contact. So the owner could be opted out, but the tenant could be receiving it. So it's a little harder. So what we're looking at is how many have we reached? How many of our customers have we actually gotten to answer the question, do you want to get an email from us or not? It would take a little bit more work. I could get that information, but then we would have to say, well, is there another contact on that account that also receives an email?
I believe it's a very low number, but we can get that number. And I'd really like to congratulate Jenny and her team. When we share that type of information, like at aqua presentations or with other water and wastewater providers, they're in the 10 or 15%. Jenny and her staff's done a remarkable job getting the emails. And then secondly, we selectively use the emails to communicate with our customers so we don't have people opting out. We don't want to have monthly emails going out talking about X, Y, and Z. We do it very strategically. So great job, Jenny, and your team.
Director Day.
Yeah, just anecdotally, we had a family gathering barbecue swim this weekend. Outside, everybody vaccinated, and it was a lot of fun. My nephew, who's 10, and always asking a lot of questions, was digging around in the kitchen and looking for some bottled water. And I said, why are you looking for bottled water? And, well, we have Alhambra at home. That's the good stuff. And I'm like, well, we've got some pretty good stuff here. You know, you can drink from the tap. That's good water. And he was asking more and more questions, but I finally convinced him. We got the ice out, and I told him that ice, by the way, is from the tap water, and gave him some nice tap water, and he swirled it, tasted it, and said, that's pretty good. So anyhow.
Yes, we are
Beat
fortunate.
Alhambra.
We are fortunate. And thank you. I think there's a couple things in your presentation that are noteworthy.
Yep.
One is people do read the waterfront, and I think that's a good thing, and it's a good source of information, dispelling some of the rumors, or at least attempting to. So that's good. And the other thing is we're moving forward. We're not slipping backwards. The approval ratings are improving very slightly, but still moving in the right direction. And I think a lot of that has to do with the customer service that people get when they call in. It's funny when you see a lot of the comments on the social media or from neighbors that say, you know, there's a water leak and nobody's doing anything. You say, well, have you called it into customer? No. Well, it starts with you. You know, if you want somebody to do something, call us. And I think most people that do call in are quite satisfied with the response that they get and the service they get. And, you know, the frustration about why does it take so long to fix these water leaks? Well, there's a lot of things. Safety is our number one issue, and getting all the underground services mapped out and getting the crews scheduled sometimes takes a long time, and we'll talk more about that here later on in the agenda. Yes, Director.
Yeah, so one of the things when you were talking about that on how we notify people, as I'm going through a grocery store and somebody recognizes me and says, wait a minute, there was and this has happened. Trust me, when you get elected, you have to answer everybody. So the question I have, and it's just a recommendation for board members and staff members, that we could get a little business card. And on the little business card, on the back of it, it will say customer service phone number, report leaks here. You know, this is our wastewater department. If you're smelling something, please call this number. And I know it would funnel into your office, but it's helpful for us with a website. We could just hand it to them.
Yep, I've already given Jennifer a stack of those. We use them out in the field. They're a very generic one with all those numbers and email and website for you.
I would like to have at least a stack of them. Thank you. All right.
Yes, Director Osborne.
This is pure supposition, but I suspect that as more and more people move from an urban area to the rural area with their water rates and somewhat to include the sewer rates, are considerably cheaper in an urban area than they are here. And you've got to explain to people that you live here, the population density affects the cost of of the infrastructure. If you're in a town, you've got a mile, you've got 400 homes on it. Here, you might have 5. And so the same pipe costs the same to put in and maintain and all that other stuff. So I think that that's part of it, that as our population becomes a little more diverse from the urban areas, and that's has increased dramatically in the last couple of years. But this is a part of my thought processes.
Okay, thank you, Director Osborne. I think a couple of comments. One is, per Director Day's story about his nephew, our water is among the best, but it might not be the cheapest. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, any public comment? Seeing none? Oop.
Rick?
Would like to
Oh,
make a
I'm
comment.
sorry, Brian.
Yep, sorry. I've had the opportunity, I want to thank Jenny for the presentation, but I've had the opportunity to work with Jenny on a few projects and a few people's questions out there. Jenny, you do a great job. I really appreciate the feedback and the input, and keep it up. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, any other board comments? Any public comment?
There does not appear to be any public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to Operations Service Line Replacement Program, Radenko, welcome.
Good morning, Board. Good morning, Mr. President. Radenko Đaković, Drinking Water Operations Manager. I'm here this morning to talk about service line replacement update and options for acceleration. In February on board meeting, I presented an update on service lines replacement program and achievements in 2020. At that time, was noticeable that ratio between emergency response and replacement and pre-planned service lines replacement is 2-to-1. At that time, board asked for information and analysis how we can improve that program and how we can reverse that ratio, how soon. Next slide, please. I will start with a basic overview of the service line replacement program. District has 41,500 service lines. We serve around 140,000 people. From that number, over 25,500 is constructed from polyethylene, high-density polyethylene tubing. Most of the polyethylene service lines were installed from 1980s until 2020, when district actually changed construction standards, and we switched from polyethylene lines to superior material, copper tubing with exterior polyethylene lining. Typical lifespan for polyethylene lines based on our data is 15 to 30 years. Design proposed life from most of the manufacturer is 50 years. And we observing in some areas of distribution system, supply system failure up to 25%. Next slide, please. This graph shows historical data regarding polyethylene lines installation, and it's visible. You know, we have a couple of peaks, housing boom, early 80s, late 80s, late 90s, early 2000s, and we have two different colors on this chart. Brownish line shows service lines that have more than 50% of the life expectancy. Blue line represents service lines that are below 50% of the life expectancy. Next slide, please. In 2020, we recorded 651 leak in our system. 505 was on service lines. That's almost 78% of total leaks. As we know, and it was presented by GM, performance indicators shows that EID has 42.41 leak per 100 miles. That's almost worse from any agency that participated in a benchmarking for AWWA. Increased service lines failure pretty much require us to move stuff from regular preventive maintenance to service lines repair and replacement. That pretty much affects our maintenance program, hydrant maintenance that is essential, especially in our county with dry weather. They need to be ready all the time for use. Also, we have thousands and thousands of wells in the ground that needs to be touched and exercised, and all of that is some way deferred because we're allocating staff for service lines. Other place. Next slide, please. In August 2019, it was presented to the board state of EID infrastructure from transmission lines, distribution lines, all the way down to service lines. At that time, board directed staff to establish a service lines replacement program. That year, we added 3 employees to the 2020 budget. Service line replacement program was established and funded in 2020 capital improvement plan. 2020 and 21 funded $4,050,000 for that program. From 2022 to 25 CIP budgeted $4.85 million annually. Next slide, please. Objectives. First objective is to reduce failure rate at or below national average. Next objective is evaluate and prioritize service lines replacement based on collected historical data last 10 years and identify areas of concerns that needs to have accelerated service lines replacement with copper tubing. And also, one of the goals and objectives is how to reverse that unfavorable ratio emergency toward pre-plan. Next slide, please. Another objective. In analysis, we considered 3 different approaches to attack the same issue, the same problem, and improve the service lines replacement program. First approach was to maintain current 3-person crew. Second approach is contract planned replacement with third party. And third approach is additional staff and create 5-person crew within El Dorado Irrigation District. At the time, all of three approaches are analyzed over 10 years span. 10 years was chosen because of the contracting approach that's supposed to end up in 10 years. Also, what we actually analyze here, basic three project management parameters: time, money, and quality. We assume that all of three approaches will keep the same quality, and we had to compromise time and money. Next slide. Also, there is numerous factors that were considered in this analysis and evaluation. First, almost half of polyethylene service lines are relatively early in their life cycle, and they can give service for 10, 15 additional years. Also, we considered issues pretty much generated with inappropriate installation. Usually, when we have housing boom, it's majority of these type of lines are installed. Everything is in a rush, and it's really hard to have good control what's going on. You know, quick installation undermines good inspection because our inspectors, we don't have so many, cannot be at the same time on multiple locations. Another thing is conflict with other utilities. Usually, first goes wet utilities, after that dry utilities, and most of the time our service lines are moved, lifted, you know, and pretty much all of that creates conditions for service lines, accelerated failure, also bedding for the service lines most of the time is not appropriate because of the lack of inspection, or everything is done in a hurry. And all of that affecting these lines greatly. Another factor that is considered, intensified service line replacement will create some unwanted impact in high density areas on our customers, from traffic control, traffic flow change, dust, noise, multiple patches, and that can, in my opinion, greatly affect relationships, district and customer.
Thank you. I kind of have a question, but maybe I'll get background first, because I was going to ask, are we documenting when we replace a line, why we think that particular line failed? Was it a bad joint? Was it a rock underneath the pipe, and that sort of stuff? But before you answer that question I was realizing we don't dig them all up necessarily. We oftentimes just bore.
We pull services, but we need to dig on both sides to expose connection on either side and connection on our main. And after that, we pull the line.
Are we able to see, was it the plastic that failed because it was bad plastic? Was it a joint?
You know, multiple factors can affect a line failure. It can be factory faulty batch that is installed, bad bedding, lack of sand around the tubing, native soil can affect, interference with other utilities.
Right,
And-
but we don't really know percentage-wise what's going on as to why.
we-
Those are all probable causes, but we don't know, you know, a bad fill and rocks in the trench is 22% or something. We don't really, we're not able to
that
track.
we don't record that
Yeah.
data.
I'm just wondering why, and I suspect it does have a lot to do with our native soil. You know, why our failure rate with the PE seems to be higher than others that maybe have alluvial soil, that sort of thing. I mean, I'm just curious.
There is few also neighboring agencies that recently switched.
They're starting to see issues?
Yeah, and even down in Sacramento area where native soil has different characteristics. Maybe it's not sharp and rigid, but has some chemical properties that interfere with the quality.
Right. Well, that, to me, points more towards, it might be the pipes and manufacturing issues, and we might want to follow that and document and track, because we had in the past, we were able to get some money back for bad plastic pipe.
Yes, I remember Four Seasons and even Blackstone, and even in Serrano, we had some faulty batches, but you know, it should be widely present in other agencies in order to get some
Right.
reimbursement.
Well, I say we might try to keep track of that.
And to that same point, we might want to tighten up our inspections on new connections that are done by the contractors and builders to make sure that the backfill is absolutely proper, and so we can try to avoid some of these issues in the future.
Yeah, that
Oh.
one of the methods, but there is no guarantee that contractors for dry utilities, when they go in, they will not interfere with our lines. And that was evident in Serrano area.
Good morning, Dan Corkin, Operations Director. The timeframe when we were experiencing a lot of those installations where we think the majority, that most recent hump, was when we actually used to have contract inspectors rather than district in-house inspectors, and that was one of the impetus for increasing district in-house inspection, was the quality inspection. So I feel pretty comfortable to say that we've recognized and addressed that concern as an agency and moved past that particular concern, notwithstanding the other items that Rodenko has listed in bullet 2 for you. So.
Good, thank you.
I have a question for Dan or Zinko or Jim or anybody. With water leakage and drought issues and everything on the forefront, was there any thought about leaving the three-man crew and adding a three-man crew in deference to 2 more guys to give them another crew and a vehicles in order to expedite this process to see if, was there any thought with that idea? Okay, Dan, take your mask off, because I read lips.
I'm sorry, I forgot. Similar to the way that Henry Ford refined his process, I think that's what staff has done on a more simple scale, but over the past 6-8 months, in working with various levels of equipment and staffing to figure out what is the most efficient way for the assembly line process. And that's how we arrived at the 2 additional staff to help with material transport and disposal, so that the main crew doesn't have to stop their production. So if we were to create a duplicate crew, we would still have that inefficiency. So I think we believe that this is the right balance between staffing and workflow as a crew of 5 for this particular task.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a good question. I was wondering that too, because I've found that sometimes the larger the crew, the less efficient you can be. But it sounds like you guys are working through that.
Another factor that needs to be considered in this evaluation, even if we go for contracted third-party, EID crews will continue to perform emergency service lines repair and replacement. contractor will pretty much do just a targeted pre-planned service lines replacement. Next slide, please. First approach, as I mentioned, is to maintain current crew. Service lines replacement program was successfully implemented in 2020. Initially, we had some challenges, to bring through 3 additional staff on the board. That took a couple of months, and after that, we were hit with the COVID. But despite that, I think it was a successful year. We were able to replace 505 service lines. 350 was emergency response and replacement, and 155 was pre-planned. During 2020, it was noticed and visible that 3-man crew is not sufficient because they supposed to do multiple activities, and their interruption of workflow was frequent, even downtime, hauling spoils from site, bringing sander or cutback, and that inefficiency affecting number of service lines replaced per day. Also, what we realized, funding for year 2020 was $4,050,000. We used $3.35 million in that year. Projected polyethylene line phasing out is over 50 years. That's way beyond expected service lines of polyethylene. Also, in this analysis, and all of 3 actually approaches, we included year after year inflationary adjustment of 3%. A ratio with this approach, emergency toward planned, after 10 years will be 50-50. And somewhere around 15, we will be able to reverse that. Next slide, please. Second approach was contract with third party. Price per service line replaced is twice higher than with the ID crew. It's $10,000, and our pre-planned with our crew, pre-planned service lines replacement is in the range of 3,500 to 52. A range is established because of the participation of extent of participation of the surface remediation, paving and concrete. But 10,000 per service line is from contractor. And that line was, that price was actually old 2.5 years. Also, this program, contracting out, will require EID involvement, EID inspection full-time and part-time presence of distribution operator for service line flushing and sampling. This approach will phase out polyethylene lines in 10 years at a rate of 2,300 service line replaced in a year. Cost of that magnitude of replacement will reach $25 million per year. That's something that EID probably cannot afford at this time. There is one thing, a ratio emergency to pre-planned replacement is reversed instantly. Also, in this analysis for this approach, we considered that emergency line replacement will decrease year after year on a rate of 10%. In 10 years, pretty much, we'll be done with the budget system. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Third approach is 5-person crew, addition of 2 crew members. With this, we will increase 60% of a line replaced in a year. Projection is from 500 to 800. Ben was talking about tests that we did in Stonegate subdivision in El Dorado Hills. We moved additional staff to service lines replacement crew. They're still working. Based on the data, by end of July, we were able to replace 393 services. That tells us pretty much our projection of 500 to 800 is very realistic. This approach will phase out polyethylene lines in 32 years. That is pretty much matching a life cycle of polyethylene lines. It will stay consistent with current capital improvement plan and funding projections, and eventual increase for inflationary effect should be done. Next slide, please. This chart graph shows all of 3 approaches. On the right side, 3-person crew will phase out polyethylene lines in 51 years. Gray area is area of the 5-person crew. Polyethylene lines will be phased out in 31 and a half years. And yellow shows phasing out in 10 years with a pace of 2,300 contracted pre-planned services replaced. Next slide, please. A recommendation approach is add 2 additional field staff, remain with existing budget with inflationary adjustment, increase service line replacement from 500 to 800 lines per year, completion and phasing out polyethylene lines will happen in 32 years. That matches full life expectancy of that type of line. Overall cost of the project, and a project is compared actually on the same dollar value. It's saving is around $5 million with this approach. This will increase efficiency in lines replacement.
Danko, could you repeat that? Because I was just wondering, are you talking about, did you look at, present value, future value of money, and all that sort of stuff?
Base benchmark was 10 years contract. And all of 3 options are done on a dollar value on end day of the contracted option. That's mean we comparing apples.
Right. Okay.
Next step, based on a recommended approach, 5-person crew. Recommendation is general manager hire 2 additional staff from current budget. Next slide, please. Questions?
So I'm sitting here in 2051. We'll be done with this project.
And you probably will be, George.
No, I don't.
Okay, any board questions for Danko? Jim, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, since it's within the capital improvement budget, I was planning to add those, but the board specifically asked, how can we accelerate this so we eliminate the emergency? So unless there's heartburn, I'm planning to do that and get on this program, get it done.
Good. I think it's a good analysis, 3 viable options, and well thought out. Let's give it a try. Director Anzini?
Yeah, just a couple questions, and let's go back to the beginning where you said hire 2 contract employees. Did you not say that?
No.
Why did I, okay.
Contract the whole.
So this is full-time FTEs that we would hire to help accelerate it, which is,
Employees to EID crew.
right, okay, thank you.
Any
Yeah.
other?
Well, just mainly just if we can get an annual update on how the program's going and measuring, my only question on this is the assumption that emergency repairs will decrease over time. I think there's also, we could be surprised, it could increase over time if we start having a higher failure rate. So we want to track that, and see if we're staying on track. Are we at some point going to want to double down if we're starting to fall behind again?
Great suggestion. Why don't I add that to the performance indicators?
Yeah.
Where we track the number of outages. I'll just put a whole new slide in there on how we're doing on the service line replacement.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Director Day, that was a great question. You may recall when we did the presentation about a year and a half ago now, in our first analysis for you, we used the term hotspots, and Patrick Wilson identified. So we do track geographically where we're having the highest rate of failure, and we're attacking those first, if you will, and that's why we're in Stonegate now. And we're most recently in Summit View because of the very high incident rate. So we're hoping to attack those highest failure rates first in order to try to maintain that. But it is a risk, and we're definitely aware of it. So thank you for that question.
Okay, well, the problem's been 40 years in the making, so we're not going to fix it overnight, but I think we have a rational and reasonable approach to turn things around. So any other board comment? Yes.
Yeah, just one other question, and I know this is coming up with the Mountain Water District meeting coming up on grants coming from a possible infrastructure program. That, would any of this qualify? Wait a minute. Never mind. I didn't see that.
No, Brian can answer that. We are applying for some of the ARAP, I think it's called, the American, whatever it's called.
Is it
Rescue Plan.
ARP?
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, so we included in a submission to El Dorado County Water Agency through and it'll eventually go to the El Dorado County Board of Supervisors, a list of projects, and one of the projects was just general water line replacement, which I think we could wrap in service line replacement as well.
Right, this could actually help accelerate that. I mean, for instance, the Golden Gate Bridge gets painted every 2 years. So, infrastructure is what it is. So you got the millions of people going across that bridge. Same thing's happening with our water lines. You got a lot of people who have water service connections, and we want to make sure their leaks are not wasting more water. So definitely part of that. The ARP.
And just
Okay.
one thing, that funding is, you have to spend it by, I think, 2026, so it's kind of a short-term thing, but it could be something, we'll have to decide whether we apply it to something like service lines or actual, we've got some other water line replacement projects in Pollock Pines, specific projects as well, so, but we can make that call. Brian Mueller, Director of Engineering, thank you.
And just to brief the board, we are submitting that. I think it's today, Brian.
Yes, Friday.
Okay, Friday, 37 million. I believe the county's probably going to take a chunk of that money. Our 2 priorities that we shared with them is the Outingdale Dam, because it's going to, hopefully it will get done soon. And then secondly is the intertie, because that would be a critical project for long-term resiliency for the district.
And then I think there's another opportunity that's on the way with the infrastructure spending. So we just keep our ears to the ground and jump on opportunities when they present themselves.
Shovel-ready project.
Better have them ready.
Any other comments? Thank you, Rodenko. Nice, good presentation.
Thank you.
Let's make it happen.
President Dwyer, we have a member of the public wishing to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Penn?
Good morning. Good morning, this is Paul Penn in Diamond Springs. Good morning, everyone. I had to step out for part of Rodenko's presentation. Two quick things. In the county's effort to provide broadband throughout the county, I know there's an agreement that whenever we open up the ground to lay conduit for fiber, has this been incorporated into this? Because it's a great opportunity. And secondly, I know there's still a lot of galvanized pipe, considering that we get at least a break a year on my stretch of the service lines. Is the galvanized pipe also in store for replacement? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Rodenko? Okay.
Good morning, Dan Corcoran again. Sometimes I think the audio, making sure we fully understood Mr. Penn's questions, but I think we do. So the first one had to do with the broadband coming to the county. And just for clarification, this type of this project is maybe a little bit different than the way you consider water line replacement. We're not going longitudinally down the street. As Rodenko had described, we're basically potholing at the distribution main in the road and then at the meter and then pulling the line in between. So wouldn't necessarily be a candidate for this broadband type project. And then the second question had to relate to, related to specifically galvanized, I believe, distribution lines is in this case Mr. Penn's referring to. All of the service lines will eventually be replaced. This program specifically is targeting the PE lines, the polyethylene lines, which are the highest. But eventually, we have lines of all types that fail over time, and this is the standard material that we're using to replace all of our service lines. So whether or not it happen to be an old galvanized line or an old copper line or a XYZ line, over the years, you have all different types of material. The copper rolled tubing with the poly sheath will be the standard material for district service line replacements for the foreseeable future.
I think Mr. Penn's question is primarily related to when we have an open trench in a street going for pipeline replacement, is EID putting in a spare conduit for possible broadband? I think the answer is no. Now, we can certainly talk to the county to see if they're prepared to fund their portion of a joint trench, because once you do a joint trench, each party starts paying for that piece of joint trench, including the conduit. So at this time, we're not participating in that.
Mr. Penn, does that answer your question?
It addressed the question. Thank you very much. Hopefully, we're working on trying to get broadband out and about, and every opportunity try to take advantage of that. So thank you very much.
Director Anzini?
Yeah, I understand Mr. Penn's comments because it is of great interest to make sure the broadband dollars are put in the right place, including all the agencies who would benefit. So, and we are definitely an agency who would benefit. And I would also make sure that people who go to our county water board meeting, who are we don't have representatives there anymore, but at least staff to talk about how they're going to be using their funding because there is broadband dollars. There's going to be available from the county. We want to be able to use some of that because of our ability to use our signaling for all of our facilities. And I think it's really important that we keep our finger in the pie.
Yeah, I would actually encourage Mr. Penn to communicate to the Board of Supervisors his desire to add funding in that as they start allocating the $37 million.
Duly noted.
Reaching back to my historical issues, this was brought up before about using our easements for broadband installation, and it was determined by council that our easements for water lines and/or sewer lines, and we were restricted from doing anything else. So maybe council could circle back and review that, but that was the opinion at the time, that we couldn't use our easements for anything but water or sewer.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, moving on to action item 12, the approving general warrant register.
Move one.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Osborne. Thank you, Director Day. Any board comments?
Hold on for 1 second. Believe that Director Veerkamp was trying to unmute himself and he accidentally turned off his camera. So,
Ain't technology great?
Director Veerkamp, if you could push your camera back on. There you go. And then unmute yourself for your comment. Thank you.
Yes, please. I will be recusing myself. Thank you on this item.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Any public comment on the warrant register?
It does not appear that we have any members of the public wishing to make a comment on the warrant registers. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
How do you vote? Division 1?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item 13. If I got that right. Is that right? Yeah. 13, the amended negative declaration. So, hey, howdy.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Doug Venable, and I'm an environmental review analyst with the district. I'm here this morning to request the board to consider the addendum to the EID Vegetation Management Project's ISMND, and to consider awarding a contract to apply herbicide treatments to the north side of the Weber Reservoir property. Next slide, please. In today's presentation, I will review the CAL FIRE grant progress and the upcoming projects we are planning to implement. We'll go over the ISMND addendum and the contract for herbicide treatments at the Weber Reservoir property. Next slide, please. Previous board actions include, in October 2018, the board adopted resolutions approving 3 CAL FIRE grants authorizing hazardous fuels treatments at 4 district facilities. In July of 2019, the board adopted the MND for the EID Vegetation Management Project. And in September 2019, the board awarded a contract to Market Forestry Management to implement the hazardous fuels treatments. Next slide, please. And a bit of a background, in September 2018, CAL FIRE awarded 3 grants to the district totaling $1,963,005 to conduct hazardous fuel treatments at Sly Park, Camp 5, Flume 46, and Weber Reservoir. Next slide. There were 118 acres around Jenkinson Lake and Sly Park that were treated. CAL FIRE approved the treatments, and the final invoice was submitted last month, which exhausted the remaining grant funds. Next slide. All right, here are some photos of the treated areas. The prescription was to limb up all trees approximately 12 feet and to remove all vegetation 10 inches and below from the high water mark back 100 feet. There were over 650 piles of vegetation to get rid of, and they were piled and then either chipped, burned, or masticated. We still have approximately 90 piles remaining that we were unable to treat with the grant funds. Next.
What's the difference between chipping and mastication?
The chipper is just the rotating chipper that you'd see. Masticating, they used a masticating head to reach down. A lot of these piles were located in steeper areas they couldn't get the track chipper to, so they had to get a masticator in there to get those. And the remaining 90 piles are on some of the steeper areas, and and we'll address that in the next slide here.
Doug, isn't the mastication leaves larger pieces of material than the chipper actually makes smaller?
That's true, that's true. And the ideal would be the chipping because it's broadcast small little chips and the masticator. But in some areas, you just have to try and reach them and treat them as you can. Next slide, please. On the Camp 5 Flume 46 grant, there were 20 acres treated at Camp 5 and 26 acres treated at Flume 46. All grant objectives were completed and CAL FIRE approved all treatments. There's approximately $40,000 remaining in grant funds, and the district received authorization to apply those funds for additional fire prevention activities, including tarping and burning the remaining piled vegetation that I mentioned in the last slide, purchase and apply herbicides to treat resprouting vegetation, and to remove trees that are dead or dying from beetle bark infestation. Next slide, please. Here's some photos of the Camp 5 area. A combination of mastication and hand treatments were used on these 20 acres. Next slide, please. And these are photos from Flume 46, and only hand treatments were used here due to the steep terrain. And just a reminder that Flume 46 is our longest wooden flume at almost 3/4 of a mile. Next slide, please. At Weber Reservoir, we treated 365 acres on the north side of the property. All grant objectives were completed, and CAL FIRE approved all treatments with approximately $445,000 remaining in grant funds. The district received authorization to use the remaining grant funds on 250 acres of herbicide treatments at the Weber Reservoir property, as well as 35 acres of mastication and hand treatments at the diversion dam in the upper canal section. And staff will be bringing a contract to present this work at the August 23rd board meeting. Next slide, please. So here are some photos from the treated areas at Weber Reservoir, and it's really hard to see how steep some of these ridges are. They don't really do it justice. Much of the area was chock full of chaparral and manzanita, 10 and 15 feet high. Again, about just over 250 acres were masticated here, and over 100 acres were hand-treated here at Weber Reservoir. Next slide, please. This is a 2018 satellite photo of Weber Reservoir before the treatments. And may I use a pointer, please?
Watch what you're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Focus.
it's way over here.
Got it. Here we go. All right, the 365 acres that were treated were on the north section of the parcel, and the district owns all of the property in red, but the treatments were north of this east-west property boundary that kind of runs on the north side of the reservoir there. My cursor's gone. Next slide, please. I think I'll just try and voice it over. This is a drone image that was composited earlier this year, and it's a little challenging to see, but the darker areas going up the ridges are the areas that have been masticated. There's also an area along the northern, kind of going east-west, and finally in the northwest side of the property that were all masticated. Next slide, please. So this is the same drone imagery, just processed to really highlight the areas that were masticated to give it a smoother texture. So you can see the ridge lines moving from south to north there. Those are the areas that were, there we go, that were masticated along with the ridge line there. And so it's a stark difference, and if you have the ability to go out there and take a walk, you'll see a lot of work's been done out there. All right, next slide, please. No worries. Okay, mastication treatments started at the Weber Reservoir property in 2019, and there has been significant resprouting since then. The revised project will apply herbicide treatments to approximately 250 acres that were previously masticated. and the follow-up herbicide treatments were recommended and approved by CAL FIRE and is a standard way to control regrowth. The initial herbicide treatments are scheduled in the fall of this year to follow up spot treatments in early of next year. Next slide, please. The project objectives are to control vegetation resprouting in previously masticated areas, maintain a fuel break on those steep sloped areas, reduce the frequency of mechanical retreatment, and provide more fuels management over the long term and protect the district's investment. Next slide, please. Now turning to the California Environmental Quality Act requirements. Staff revised the EID vegetation management project to include the use of herbicides at the Weber Reservoir property. An addendum to the ISMND was prepared and evaluated the use of herbicide treatments and determined that there were no new significant impacts and required no additional or change to the mitigation measures in the original MND. Next slide, please. CEQA does not require an addendum to be circulated for public review, but in keeping with the board's guidance, staff provided notices to the adjacent property owners and the responsible agencies as we did with the initial ISMND. The addendum was open for public review and comment from June 24th to July 23rd, and we received no comments. Next slide, please. To complete the CEQA process, the board shall consider the addendum to the ISMND prior to making a decision on the revised project. Staff will file a notice of determination upon approval of the revised project. Next slide, please.
Question. So would herbicide treatment be an ongoing annual thing? Is this a one-off, just to help kind of clean it up one last time? Where are we at on that?
This would be a one-time application with grant funds. The long-term management of the facility would probably fall back to our operations management and manager. And director.
Director Day, again, another great question, thank you. So, Dan Corcoran, Operations Director. There's post-treatment, there's three techniques, right? So you can put fire on the ground, which, as we talked about, is probably not a good idea in this case from CAL FIRE. Right. Or go in with further mechanical treatments or chemical treatments. I think long-term, this technique to go in that first year or two after to try to stunt the herbaceous growth, the ceanothus, these type of more flammable, is a common technique. Thereafter, whether or not it's a combination of some more targeted with CAL FIRE crews, if to the extent that they're still available, that we can go in and do piles like we do on a lot of other properties and occasional herbicide application. That's the way I foresee this, hopefully, now that we've gotten in a more managed state long term. So it'll probably be some combination of mechanical and perhaps some, obviously a lesser need, but some herbicide treatments long term, consistent with how we manage these other large parcels. So.
Okay, I just would, because I suspect we might get questions with, how would what's the half-life of the chemicals, and what's the effect on the watershed and all that sort of stuff.
For sure. So thank you. So any chemical that we apply is following a licensed pest control advisor that are licensed by the State Department of Pesticide Regulations. So that actual PCA rec is included in the bid documents, and then that PCA comes out and ensures that all of the applicable label requirements are being followed. But in this case, obviously, proximity to waterways is one of the most sensitive aspects.
Right. So. Yeah, and I'm glad that we're communicating with the people that live around there. And I think we should, before even application, we should continue to do that, just so they know. Yeah.
Director Osborne?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Alan, because I was going to ask the same exact thing with the type of pesticide we're using, or herbicide, excuse me, over drinking water supply. But another comment, been talking to some forester friends of mine, and in my own backyard, the vegetation is in high stress. Madrones are losing leaves, oaks are losing leaves, the conifers are dropping needles, and this is a natural way for them to protect themselves. But I'm very concerned that we will probably get another beetle infestation very shortly, and we may be back at Sly Park doing in our other facilities with more requests for bug problems.
Director Ray, just to address one of your questions, we've chosen to adopt a larger buffer, even in the PCA recommended, and we adopted our buffers that we use in our Project 184, which is 100 feet from any waterway and 50 feet from any seasonal stream. So it goes above and beyond what was required.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And Director Osborne, we did also find another small infestation of beetle at Weber. And so those funds that we mentioned before can be used for those as well. So we plan to do that and use every bit of grant money we can before the March 15th deadline.
Okay, thank you. Don't be doing any limbing or anything like that, because you take a limb off now, the bugs are gonna hit it just wham. So just protect your own trees for your own usage.
Understood. So moving on to the services contract. Staff issued an RFP from June 21st to July 21st. 9 firms attended the pre-proposal job walk, and the district received 2 responsible proposals. Next slide, please. D'Angelo Brothers LLC was the responsible low bidder at $129,500. Next slide. Funding for the services contract is fully reimbursable through the CAL FIRE Weber Reservoir Grant. Staff time for the administration and project management of the grant were reported as matching funds to CAL FIRE. Board option. Option 1 is to consider the addendum to the mitigated negative declaration for the EID Vegetation Management Project and award a contract to D'Angelo Brothers LLC in the not-to-exceed amount of $129,500 for herbicide treatments on the district's Weber Reservoir property. Next slide. Option 2 would be to take other action as directed by the board, and option 3 would be to take no action. Staff recommends option 1. Any questions?
Move on.
Thank you, Director Osborne.
I'll second that with a question, and this is, get this from Director Dwyer, there's a significant, I mean, they're not huge contracts, but there's a big disparity between the two in cost. Did staff review to make sure that the low bidder had appropriately considered and covered everything?
Vera Camp has a question.
Yeah, Director, that's a good question. We had quite a bit of disparity, not only on this contract, but our contract that's coming up on the next board meeting. We believe that a lot of the disparity is caused by either prevailing wage requirement and/or the ability to, for firms to just have economies of scale and the folks that they put out here. There was a lower bid, and they were not responsible due to the inability to do the prevailing wage requirement. So the high bidder was a larger environmental firm that I think just had a more overhead cost.
Director Verkamp?
Yeah, I was just going to add, as well as move the item, but we're already there, but doing some vegetation management on some of my acreage, the Director Osborne's comment was great. The vegetation is stressed, so now's a good time to treat it. You're going to get a better reaction because it's going to absorb the chemicals. So I definitely would be for this, and again, I think we've taken the precautions and we'll continue to. So that's it.
Thank you. Do we have any experience with D'Angelo Brothers, the potential awardee?
I don't know of any. They are a pretty well-known herbicide application and pesticide application company, but I have no experience with them.
Okay, thank you. And also, you know, as an inherent part of the grant, one of the questions they ask in there that's frequently overlooked as we scramble for the grant funds is how are you going to maintain this over the long term? And so this is how we're going to maintain it. And it's really an obligation that comes with the receiving the grant dollars to do the work.
Excellent point.
So, any other board comment? We have a motion and a second. Any other board comments? Any public comment?
It does not appear that we have any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 13. Would you like me to call the vote?
Yes, please.
How do you vote? Division 1,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 5, Division 2,
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
President Dwyer, I was just sitting here thinking, here's another $1.9 million grant. Last board meeting was a $1.8 million grant for generators, and I know there's others out there. And I just want to take this opportunity for staff, all the staff that work on these grants. You know, that's a lot of money that we save our ratepayers, and we're aggressively pursuing it.
Very good point. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 14. Outingdale Dam.
Thank you, Director Dwyer. Good morning, everybody. John Kessler, representing Engineering, Water, and Hydro Divisions. And this is our opportunity to provide you an update on the status, condition of the dam, and to consider funding emergency declaration and rehabilitation of the dam. Next, please. The main issues here are the extreme drought conditions and the drying of the Middle Fork Consumnes River gave us the opportunity to enter the normally flowing river and conduct a detailed inspection. The inspection revealed significant damage and deterioration to the dam, warranting emergency rehabilitation, which, if put into effect, would prevent catastrophic failure and maintain the essential water surface to the Outingdale community. The proposed resolution would declare an emergency regarding the dam, allowing for expedited emergency restoration and to allow for that to be conducted during a time when the water flows are lowest and providing the least effort to bypass inflows around the dam. Next, please. To help us orient as we look at some close-up slides, we've assigned these section numbers 1 through 7. So whether your point of reference is left looking upstream or downstream, but in normal dam-related jargon, we normally talk about in reference to downstream. So if I say right, I'm talking about section 1, and left, I'm talking about section 7, okay? And this dam, best we know, was constructed in the early 20s, making it about 100 years old. We don't have any drawings on the dam. My understanding, this is something that we agreed to acquire years ago, decades ago. And so we don't have a lot of information as to what it's really made of other than our firsthand observations. Next, please. This is section 1 near the right abutment. You can see hanging concrete next to the buttress wall that kind of just left to the, if you can point to that, Jennifer. Okay, thank you. That's what I'm talking about. That's just hanging by a piece of cable, and it's prone to fall. It's hazard there. You can see the sandbags that were placed by crews in the last month to allow the ponding of water within the pumping area, but that's not a long-term solution either. So that's something that would be addressed with the rehabilitation. You can also see some beginning of undermining erosion of the base of the buttress wall here. And that's even more problematic on some of the other buttress walls. Next. This is the next section over, calling it section 2. Most of the dam crest is already broken off. You can see other pieces that are loose, ready to break off. You can see the opening in there where the arrow is pointing. Just below it, there's water that's actually a through hole right here, where water is passing all the way through from upstream to downstream, and there are other places like that. You can see that crack joint to the right of it, also representing a through hole that may have been an old construction joint between a cold, basically the pores of the concrete originally in that dam. Next, please. This is a close-up. You can see the through hole a little bit better. You can see how this is fragmenting. And you can also see where the red arrow is, the very minimal reinforcement. That's a steel pipe, 3/4 to 1 inch diameter, that seems to be the essence of the steel reinforcing that we could see. There was also evidence of braided cable, steel braided cable, that was wound through this structure in places, but we really don't have any idea as to what its spacing and consistency is throughout the pour. Next, please. This gives you an overview to see more of the buttress walls. You can see how broken up they are, and certainly there was evidence before this recent inspection that some of this was evident, but what we were able to do is take a closer look in low water conditions and see that that things are really troubling from what we could see. This type of dam is often referred to as an Amberson dam. It relies on the slab or the main dam structure being supported by buttress walls. And it was a variation to a gravity dam. So if you're familiar with Folsom Dam or Chili Bar Dam, that's gravity, which is a very large mass of concrete, large footprint, and basically its weight holds it. And you also have to deal with having to avoid uplift pressures that can move the dam or cause it to become unstable. This, of course, doesn't have a drain system like that, but it's very reliant on those buttress walls. And that was the most troubling discovery in our inspection, was looking at their condition. Next, please. So looking more closely at the buttress walls, you can see voids at the 2 yellow arrows. The upper yellow arrow and the second buttress from the right bank, you can also see that pipe reinforcing, which appears to be about the lone steel reinforcement that exists currently. And of concern is that lacking the steel reinforcement in those buttress walls from the original construction, these are going to be even more prone to breakup and damage over time from the particularly high flow conditions. Next, please. Moving our way across, this is now looking at sections 3, 4, and 5 in the buttress walls. Between, you can see still troubling deterioration going on until we get closer to the one being kind of pinned by a rock and close to the spillway section. The ones on that side, 2 of those on that side are showing better conditions. The photo on the right is that close-up of that crack, which is basically a through hole, obviously, and of a concern that that will continue to even fragment and break up or be more prone to do so over time. Next, please. This is, we refer to the spillways or flashboard section as section 6, and then the far right or left bank as being section 7. But you can see the buttress wall being damaged. You can also see the sandbags, which we consider to be just temporary and will not be resilient to winter conditions. Next. And also a view of this left abutment. You can see a little bit of concrete on the far right edge on top of the rock. So that's the remains of the old dam crest, and that we believe went all the way across to the dam crest on the far left, just beyond the flashboard structure. So the intent would be to restore that to its full height if we proceed with repairs. Next, please. So just to give you an overview, looking from left bank to right, you can see the sandbags in the foreground, the flashboard section, get an idea of the size and width of the dam, and you can see the Swiss cheese section on that upstream side, which is also very troubling, and knowing there's through holes, and then the sandbag section near the right bank. Next, please. And a close-up of that troubling area on the upstream face is as this large voids, really high degree of deterioration has gone on, broken crest over farther to the right, just something that's not going to stand the test of time or be reliable. But again, the emphasis is, at this point, is those buttress walls in terms of the overall ability of the dam to withstand any significant forces, particularly in a flooding condition. Next, please. So the approach that we propose to rehabilitate the dam, fortunately, there were some repairs made to the upstream face. This is a photo from 2014 showing patching that had gone on. The extent of voids was not as significant in what area you see patched, but what sits above the top 4 feet or so is all the more or significantly deteriorated in very deep pockets. And so our idea here is that not just to patch it, but this is something that requires some steel reinforcing as well. And so we're proposing to do a concrete overlay about 6 inches thick. This would be a cast in place, formed and poured, and something that the new rebar would tie into the existing structure and give us some impact resistance as well as service life by having temperature control in the concrete as well. And that would be tied into making the crest even all the way across as well.
John, those 3 pipes at the bottom, what was the purpose of those? Do you have any idea?
They don't appear to ever have been gated outlets from what
That's
I can
what I
see.
mean,
So I think they were drains that maybe were used in construction.
But the overlay will block those, right?
So the overlay would not go down that far. The overlay would stop at the yellow line, but we would probably plug those 3 drains more effectively from the upstream end, and then allow for some weep drains through the new downstream face concrete we would pour in case there was any water seep through that.
Okay.
Next, please. Also, we're looking at reinforcing the top edge so even concrete can be affected with battering rams of trees during a flood condition. So we're looking at adding a steel angle that would help provide a more resilient and armored edge on both sides of the crest, both upstream and downstream. Next, please. For the buttress walls, we're looking at a similar approach, reinforcing steel mat grid on both sides of the wall and on the downstream edge and along the top. These would be tied into the existing structure, doweled in, anchored in with epoxy grout. Also, we're looking at adding some deep dowels that would go into the bedrock, and that would basically make what we're adding stand alone in terms of adequacy to hold up the dam. So we wouldn't be relying so much on the old buttress walls, as you can see, are questionable just by viewing them. And we would have something that really is bringing the dam back up to a modern standard in terms of its strength and stability. Next, please. Similarly, on the downstream face, we would build a similar grid, 6-inch thick concrete with steel reinforcing mat, and again, doweled in along the downstream face to tie that structure in all the more than just the single dowels that, the best we can see, are currently in place for each of the buttress walls. There also seems to be the pipe dowels within the main dam structure at some every 2 or 3 foot spacing that are helping it as well. But as you can see, the condition of the concrete, it's breaking apart and it needs help. So the photo or the lines on the right would basically look at, we would be maintaining the character of the dam, but it would be just the buttress walls would be a little bit wider as a necessity to accomplish the reinforcing. Next, please. So the funding requirements breakout is $50,000 for additional engineering services. And this would include, we're having some sketches prepared to help us from our structural engineer, Tom Burkhardt at GHD, who we've already got underway trying to prepare for this should the board decide to move ahead and allow us to move this forward as quickly as possible. And it would also provide us an as-built survey We had a drawing of the dam, so we have a good record of what we have out there, and we can carry that forward in our record and planning. Materials, $50,000, capitalized labor. This would be performed in-house crews, primarily by the hydro division with, at this point, help from borrowing one collections person. The water division is maxed out in terms of their current duties, so we're looking at being able to work this in before the fall outage that begins in October for the hydro division. And we include $50,000 in contingency for a total project cost of $440,000. And the funding source would be 100% water rates. Option 1 is to adopt a resolution declaring an emergency regarding the condition of Outingdale Diversion Dam, authorize funding of $50,000 for engineering services, $50,000 for materials, $290,000 for capitalized labor, and $50,000 in contingency for a total funding request of $440,000 for the emergency rehabilitation of the Outingdale Diversion Dam, project number 21045. Option 2, take other action as directed by the board. Option 3, take no action.
Okay.
And our recommendation is option 1.
Thank you very much. Any motion?
I'll move approval. Motion to approve it, option 1.
Thank you, Director
Veer
Ensign.
Campbell,
With
Veer
the-
Campbell second.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Now I have questions.
Okay, shoot.
Dialogue. Yeah, a couple things, and maybe I missed it. How old is the current dam in its structure right now?
We believe it's about 100 years old.
Okay.
We believe it was constructed in the early 1920s.
And this is the same waterway that provides the Outingdale's water service?
Yes,
And this is the same place where we're now trucking water to, for 4 or 5 trucks a day to get water to those people?
yes.
So is this going to help future droughts?
I don't think it will deter or help us to find water when it's not naturally occurring
Okay.
from Mother Nature. But this is one of the few years, I believe, Dan Rudenko, this was the 3rd year that we've owned the Outingdale system that we've had to truck? Is that the history? Okay.
Okay.
So
all
just to
right.
give you an idea of frequency, and that dates back to, what year did we acquire? Was it the 30s? 1969.
So we inherited it in 53 years ago. So, okay, so the question is do we want to maintain and keep and repair a 100-year-old dam before it completely falls apart? All right, thank you.
Yes.
Go ahead, George.
I already made it's on the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry. John, just a question. I don't want to be accused of boardroom engineering, but I will be. When I asked the question about the 3 pipes in the bottom, wouldn't it be easier just to form up the whole thing and re-concrete the whole face of it instead of building, wouldn't it be easier to do that?
It's not necessarily easier, but we feel like we can drill and anchor into the upstream face above the previous repair area and work our way up in the area that's so badly remaining degraded as it is now. But it's certainly a reasonable approach to consider doing that. What we were trying to avoid was accomplish this within a 4 to 5 week period and not be hung up with sediment removal and the additional cleanup and so on. And so in 2014, we performed repairs on the left side on the base of the dam, and so the lower portion is still in pretty good shape, from best we can tell. It's that right portion along the bottom where leakage was not as effectively sealed because we got run out from a storm and weren't able to go as far as we wanted to. So we think that this approach as currently proposed would allow us to take care of everything that's basically above the water line or shortly below, everything that's badly deteriorated. If we had to go in at a later time, we could excavate sediment, we could do the patching on the bottom, we could even extend the overlay wall all the way to the bottom. But it's not outside of our means right now to go ahead and take that approach if that's the interest of the board and.
Well, you guys are the experts. I just ask, and it seemed to me it'd be easier in the long run to build it from the bottom up and get it over with. But I'm not an engineer.
Well, that kind of ties in with my question and concern of when you start scaling and cleaning, and it looks like it's in really bad shape, there's, I would think, some risk that you start pulling things off to get loose stuff off of it, that it just keeps coming off. And then you get into the question, well, shouldn't we have just rebuilt the whole thing? But then you kind of answered that, because we have a window of opportunity here that we hope doesn't come along too often, but it may. The second part of the question was what Lori was asking of, wouldn't sealing this up and rebuilding the top, restoring the top, buy us at least some additional time in a drought year where they might buy an extra month of not having to truck? I don't know. It seems like it would, but.
Director Day, thank you for the question. I think looking at the average usage of between 40 and 60,000 gallons a day, we're probably talking a couple days of difference. So the function of this facility is to provide a location for which the diversion point to work, not to store water. But if we lost that facility and we're unable to basically adjust the grade in order to maintain a sufficient pool, that's what we're concerned about. So as you can see from the photos, even that clearly the 2017, 2019 has not done well to the face of that facility, and we don't want to have another set of high flows that causes a catastrophic failure and our inability to divert water next spring and summer. And that's really what today's action is about.
That's a good point.
Thank you. Other board comments? I have one. It's always kind of scary when your dam safety engineer uses the terms like the condition is troubling. So, yeah. And the photographs definitely show it's troubling. And we do have that small window of opportunity before the rains come to get this work done. Are there any, my question, that was a preamble. My question is, are there any outside regulators involved in this, Department of Dam Safety or waterways, and who else is gonna participate?
Very good question. This dam is not jurisdictional under the Division of Safety Dams because it doesn't meet the height or the storage requirements. 25 feet high, 50 acre feet in general, although there's some variations of that. It's not a FERC regulated facility, as you know, no hydropower.
Right.
With regard to CEQA, we believe this will qualify for a categorical exemption. And with regard to California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we believe we can file a notice basically exempting from the normal permitting because of the emergency condition. And this was done in 2014 as maybe as well as previously in 2005 with repairs, taking the same approach, which were successful.
I think all of those are good answers, given the narrow time window that we have. So.
How much water is temporarily held back there? I'm just curious. Ballpark.
1.5 acre feet.
Okay.
Yeah, Rodenko answered the question as 1.5 acre feet.
Thank you.
Any other board comments? Okay, is there any public comment on this issue? Agenda item.
President Dwyer, does not appear there any members of the public wishing to make a comment on action item number 14. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
How do you vote? Division 1?
Aye.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 5?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Start digging.
Another week or two. Okay.
Okay, moving on to item 15, employment contract. Jose?
Good morning, members of the board, members of the public. My name is Jose Perez. I'm the HR director here at El Dorado Irrigation District. And what I have for you this morning is a brief presentation on salary survey data that illustrates the need to make market adjustments to both the general manager and general counsel classifications consistent with the district's goal of paying competitive wages. Next slide, please. Summary of issues. On an annual basis, the board conducts an evaluation of the job performance of both the general manager and general counsel. HR staff, on a periodic basis, compiles labor market data, or what we call salary surveys, in order to analyze the competitive of salary structures here at the district. That compensation data, or salary surveys, as you are aware, is the primary factor in maintaining competitive wages. Given the defensibility of the methodology utilized, it's not surprising that this approach is widely used by most public agencies. And although salary surveys are the primary factor in setting competitive wages, other factors also apply. You want to look internally. You want to look at the internal structures for pay equity and to avoid pay compression. So given that salary surveys are the primary driver for setting competitive wages, selecting the right local labor market is critical. So how do we do that? Next slide, please. So salary survey criteria. Oops, go back a slide. First, it's important to understand what the labor market is and how it affects wages in a certain geographic area. In simple terms, a labor market consists of employers within a general geographic area who are engaged in similar activities, who compete for the same labor force, and therefore can influence wages in that geographic area for certain professions. So some of the criteria utilized in identifying a labor market is employer size, again, geographic proximity, and services provided by those comparable employers. It's important, though, to highlight that when we're conducting salary surveys, executive level classification surveys differ in that they would include comparable agencies from an expanded regional area or sometimes even nationally. And so therefore, that is an important distinguished nuance when we're conducting labor or salary surveys. Next slide, please. So one of those periodic surveys occurred in 2020, and in that survey, that initial survey, we did include the typical expanded view of comparable agencies. And at that time, as noted in this table, that salary survey identified the general manager lagging the labor market mean by 12%, and the general counsel, even worse, lagging by approximately 23%. Now, we talk about the expanded regional comparables. We also included the American Water Works Association salary survey. That's an annual survey that this outside organization puts together, and it's a national composite. So they will factor in salaries from all various states across the nation. So it's a good measure to see how competitive wages are here at the district. Next slide, please. However, staff subsequently updated that salary survey in 2021, and what we did is we narrowed that geographic area. So in other words, we removed some of the expanded regional data, including the American Water Survey. What was the result or the effect? The effect was a salary survey that more closely mirrors the labor market utilized for non-executive level classifications. So while that affected the percentages you see in the table, they nonetheless indicated that even in that narrow survey, both the general manager, general counsel classification still lagged the market mean. So the next two slides present the actual updated salary data points. As you can see from this table, this is for the general manager, and what you're seeing here is the market mean is $21,841 per month. and you'll see the bar chart illustrate the district's relative position against that average. The next slide shows the same data. The comparable agents differ to the extent that not all agencies have a general counsel. And so in this slide, we see that the narrow geographic area indicated that the average of monthly salaries paid among comparable agencies is $19,025. And so we see EID as the relative position to that market average. We talked earlier about, besides salary survey data, we should look internally and see the equity among district structures. And so what we're seeing here is the pay differences between the general manager and the general counsel as represented by a percentage. And then more importantly, you're seeing the spread between the general counsel and some director level classifications. I will tell you that most public agency pay salaries, when you go to their websites and you look at, okay, what does the director of, say, operations, what is the pay equivalent to a general manager or general counsel, you'll see a nice spread. Typically what we like to see and what pay consultants have recommended is a difference of at least 20%. While not all comparable agencies have that, they all have at least a greater spread than 3.25% between, say, a director level and the attorney at the agency. And that's an important factor that I think informs a decision on setting competitive wages. Next slide. So based on the salary survey results and also internal compression, the above table illustrates the market adjustments being considered this morning. Rather than increase the salaries of the general manager and general counsel in one step, the draft contract amendments implement small increases over a period of time. So if you look at both contracts collectively, for example, the general manager's contract amendment that's before the board, for the 3-year period covering that those increases, that would represent a total increase or a difference from existing pay of $31,260 if the board implements that contract adjustment. For the general counsel, it's a little bit more because that classification lags the market even more. So for the 3-year collective period, you'd be looking at an additional cost of approximately $42,736. Again, this achieves a closer relative position to the labor market, but over an extended period of time. Next slide. So the above table again illustrates what we're proposing, and we're looking at it a little bit differently. Currently, the general manager's salary as represented by a monthly amount, as well as the general counsel's monthly salary amount. In the AIS, we spell out specifically what the increase is to those monthly salaries as represented by the percentage increase to each classification. Next slide, please. Associated with the board's consideration to implement these contract amendments, we also have to look at our public pay schedule. Anytime the board makes a change or there's a change associated with contract negotiations, the board must adopt the revised public pay schedules. You'll see those as attachments to this board agenda. And so all that this slide seeks to represent is that concurrently you'll be updating, if the board approves the contract amendments, the revised public pay schedules that reflect this data. Recommendation is board preference, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
And thank you, Jose, and thank you. I know you put in a lot of work gathering the data and analyzing the data and revising the data, and I really appreciate all the effort you put into this. The board empowered Director Anzini and myself to negotiate the contract amendments with both the general manager and general counsel. We've done that, and those proposed contract amendments are what's before the board today. So I will entertain a motion to approve the contract amendments as presented.
Mr. Chair, Director Veerkamp will move with the comment, and that would be that we also looked at total cost of the benefit packages amongst these surveys and found that they were all similar or comparable, and that we weren't missing anything of major significance.
Thank you, Director Veerkamp. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Director Anzini. Any board discussion?
Let's get on with it.
Thank you.
I just would like to say that appreciate Jim and Brian's patience. This has been an ongoing discussion for many years. And I think this is a fair and reasonable approach and compromise. I'm sure they would love to get it all up front, but I think this is a good compromise between everybody to spread it out a little bit. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
His wife was going to Nordstrom, but she has to wait a little longer.
Director Anzini?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Jose, for the wonderful homework that you did, and you provided us a lot of data. And this has been a discussion over the last two months on where we go from here. Of course, it's incumbent that our employees are fairly paid, but we also have a very, very competitive market out there. And if we are not paying all of our employees a fair wage, it doesn't help our agency. And ultimately, when the data just show that in competition of other agencies of like kind, not large agencies versus ours, that this definitely is a need that will help the whole salary schedule, which we will be discussing in the future. So I appreciate all the hard work. The board favored this, and that's why it's on the agenda.
Any other board comments? Are there any public comment?
President Dwyer, at this time, it does not appear that there are any members of the public wishing to speak. Would you like me to call for the vote?
Yes, please.
How do you vote Division 1?
Aye.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 5? Aye. Division 2?
Aye.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will adjourn to closed session. Council, do you have a time estimate for us?
Thank you, President Dwyer. And yes, we will be adjourning into closed session to discuss the matter that's agendized on today's agenda as closed session A. I anticipate it will take approximately 20 minutes or not less than 20 minutes. And just before we adjourn into closed session, I'd just like to point out that that we have added one member of staff here to the list of proposed agency designated representatives. So I just want to clearly state that during the public portion of this in order to comply with the Brown Act.
Thank you.
When do these take effect? Salary increases?
I'm sorry?
Can we just have Jose come to the podium and repeat former Director Rafferty, acting on behalf of the Mountain Democrat, repeat his question and answer it for the record? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. The question was, when do these contract amendments take effect? And the answer is August 9th, today.
Thank you. Then we will.
We'll just let Pat do his thing, and then we could discuss the logistics after
That we will adjourn the session and reconvene no sooner than 11:35.
For the members of the public participating, we will close this session and reopen once
We're gonna stay here.
the board has finished their closed session item.
Okay. regular board meeting of August 9th, 2021 of the El Dorado Irrigation District at about 11:47. We met in closed session and there are no reportable actions taken. Any other comments? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Just as a reminder, if the board members could take a look at the items, the tentatively scheduled items for the next meeting. There are no review of assignments, and the meeting's adjourned at 11:47.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks to all.